And an ultra is like a lifetime in 36 hours. And it was so freaking true. Like all the ups and downs, the great times, the sad times, the hard times, the cold times, the hot times, like it all was. And when I crossed that finish line, I was like, I did it. I can't believe I did it.
Running 100 miles seems impossible, and maybe even kind of crazy. And it is, but we believe in big crazy dreams. That's why we ran 100 miles. It was such a life-changing experience for us, we decided to devote this podcast to preparing and inspiring you to run your first ultra race.
Are you ready to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows? Are you ready to do what you once thought was impossible? Are you ready for your trail to 100? Thank you for joining us here on Trail to 100, the podcast made to help you finish your first 100-mile race. My name is Jacob Bateman, and joined along with me today is one of our former guests of the podcast, Ryan Head. And along with him, we have one of his good friends and his crew chief for the Wasatch 100-mile race, Nate Allred. Now, Ryan just completed the Wasatch 100, and this was his first 100-mile completion, second attempt. And so Ryan has a really unique story. You can go back and listen to his first episode with us about his first 100-mile attempt, which ended at mile 50. And so he kind of had to go back to the drawing board, reevaluate in order to be ready for the Wasatch 100. And boy, Ryan did that. He hit training hard, and he made sure that he was in the right mental state, and he went out there and kicked butt at the Wasatch 100, which is a race here in the Wasatch Mountains of Utah, and it has about 23 to 24,000 feet of vertical gain on a lot of technical terrain. Very tough course, and Ryan was able to come out on top, but it did not happen without a lot of trials along the way, and Ryan had to find moments where he had to dig deep. And honestly, at one point of the race, it looked like a finish might not even happen. But Ryan was able to come out of those dark places and get that finish. And I'm excited for you guys to listen to this as I was able to pace him through those last 30 miles. So great talk that I was able to have with Ryan and Nate as we talk about his first 100-mile finish. So let's get to it. Ryan, to have you back on the podcast. And Nate, we're excited to have you join along as well as we recap Ryan's epic 100-mile race. So thank you, both of you guys, for joining the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. We're excited to talk about it.
So let's just give a little go back in time a little bit before we dive into this 100 that you had, Ryan. So give us a little bit of a reintroduction, Ryan, on your part, on kind of who you are as a runner, your running background, and like what made you decide to go for the Wasatch 100.
Yeah, you guys are going to make me bring up bad memories, so I don't know if I want to go down this path. Anyways, thank you again. Thank you for having me on the podcast again. You know, for me, as I mentioned, a few months back, I got into running. I would say I've always liked running. I elaborate on this previously, but running's always just been fun for me. I liked it in my youth. I actually thought about this story, and I was like, I got to tell you guys next time I go on. But I remember the first time I found out I liked running, it was because I got in trouble with my mom, and she's probably going to hear this podcast, so it's going to be a great memory for her. But she kicked me out of the car. We were at Macy's in Clearfield, and it was by Main Street and 193. She kicked me out of the car because I was acting up, and I remember I ran home from there. It was about like 4.5 miles, and it was like nighttime, and I remember her being like, why didn't you get back in the car? Because she kept pulling up and trying to grab me and be like, get in the car. And I was like, no, leave me alone. I was a dumb teenager. And I remember I got home and I was like, I actually kind of like that. That was fun. And so it kind of just spiraled into who I am as a person. I ran a little bit in junior high for like the track team, but I was mostly doing football, baseball, other stuff like that. And then I've had, 2 major knee injuries on the same knee, fully reconstructed knee twice on my right knee. And then, after my LDS mission, I put on a ton of weight. And again, as I mentioned previously, A big fan of the stair climber. That's what helped me lose a lot of my weight and eat right. And then it's just been a slow, gradual jump back into it. I started with 1 mile on a treadmill, which led to opening up Pandora's box, if you will, about 10 years ago now. And I've just slowly went from a 5K to 10K to a half marathon, of my first full marathon being the Ogden Marathon in 2018, and then moving to the 100 miler this year, first attempt being Antelope, and I recapped that in detail previously. And then I'm doing Wasatch, a couple days or probably about a week or so ago.
Awesome. So Ryan, tell us, maybe you can give us, how did you and Nate get hooked up, and how did he become your crew chief for this 100-mile race?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So me and Nate, it's an interesting dynamic. It has a lot to do with our religion to figure out how we became friends. But we served in an LDS bishopric, which is, kind of a leadership of an area here in Utah. And we were introducing ourselves to, in the group. This was back in 2018, and we both talked about how we liked running. And that just opened Pandora's box, in my opinion. He was telling me about how he did St. George for the first time, and I was like, what? And I'm like, I want to do St. George. And, I talked about how I'd done Ogden that year, and that was it. And we're like, well, we should go for a run sometime. And we've been running ever since, in my opinion. I mean, we both have suffered through some injuries and some low points, but it's been great because I feel like we always pick each other up. And then I feel like we're always doing, either he's pacing me or he's out there running with me. We're suffering together. So it's been fun. And, when I thought to myself truly who'd probably be the best person to be my crew chief, I thought it would be Nate, but I was a little hesitant to ask. And he was more the one that took the reins. Was like, yeah, I want to be part of this whole thing. And I was like, are you sure you want to do this whole day? And he was like, yeah, I'm taking the day off. And I was like, man, you really know what this entails? He's like, of course, I don't care. And it meant a lot. It's been really cool to hear what people have said about Nate, about him being a true friend, which I totally agree. And it's been awesome, with him being willing to sacrifice his Friday and Saturday. And it wasn't just him, it was his whole family. And I know we'll go into more detail about that shortly, but they came up and spent so much time being there, helping me, and we're just scratching the surface of the details of what they did and what he did for me. And so I truly am beyond grateful for his friendship, as well as Jacob, you for pacing me as well, and Ken Duncan as well. You guys, I owe the race to you guys. I really do, in a lot of ways.
Well, don't take any credit away from yourself here, Ryan. But Nate, tell us, so what is your running background? Ryan was saying you've ran a couple marathons, so what is your running background, and what did you think when Ryan told you, hey, I want to do Wasatch, and then especially, leading into you becoming the crew chief as well?
Yeah, so I mean, my background with running, I think back to, Ryan says he's always liked running. That wasn't the case for me. Growing up, I associated running with pain, and I always loved basketball and other sports too, but running was kind of like the chore associated with all those, and I didn't really love it, but I discovered running as a fun thing and as a hobby. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I had a sister-in-law that invited my wife and I to run a marathon, and it was St. George. And first I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, obviously. But then I thought about it, and I kind of got excited about just the challenge of it. And kind of taking on that challenge and getting into it was really what made me fall in love with the process of kind of getting out there, setting goals, working hard, feeling the pain, but then also feeling kind of the runner's high and some of those positives that come with running. And I also kind of discovered the social aspect of it too, because I'd go out and run with my wife, which was fun. But then I discovered that Ryan was into running, and we went out a few times. And so then all of a sudden you have the social aspect of going out on a Saturday morning with a bunch of the guys and being able to sit there and talk for 2 hours while you're running. And so I love that. I love the idea of setting goals and doing hard things. I kind of have a little bit of an OCD personality where, I like, and I'm also analytical, so I like kind of putting out a plan and then really sticking with that and trying to challenge myself to do it. So I really like that. And so like Ryan said, we've been running together for years, and we've always talked about Wasatch 100 as kind of like, that big race that's out there that we didn't know if we could do, but would be really cool if we could do someday. And Ryan, I've wanted to do it, and I still do want to do it, but I think Ryan stepped up and put his name in the raffle. And in the back of my mind, I was like, well, even if he does get drawn, who knows? Like he probably won't get there on year one. It'll take him a few years to figure it out, but everybody that knows Ryan knows that like when he takes on a challenge, he's serious about it. So he really did that. And when he got closer, I'm like, yeah, I want to be a part of it because I think that it's just a fun energy to be out there. B, I wanted to run part of it, and Ryan will tell you that I kept saying things like, hey, why don't I just start with you and see how far I can go? And then he's like, no, you can't really do that, Nate, because it's against the rules and they don't let pacers come in till this spot. But for me, it's just a big adventure, and I'm like, I want to go there. I don't want to leave my family for the whole weekend, so I'll bring them because they'll have fun too. So, a lot of it was just the selfish part of like, I want to get out there and have fun too.
It really is. Like Melody and I always say, it's like, it's something special just about being able to crew and pace someone at their 100. I mean, you want to say you're there entirely for the person, that looks all honorable, but it is just fun to help other people out. It literally is just a fun weekend to get out there and be with.
Yeah, screw Ryan. I'm out there to have fun. No, I wanted to help him too.
I felt the same way when I paced you, Jacob. Like I was there to help you, but I was having a good time. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. So before we get to race day though, Ryan, we gotta hit on this. So you DNF'd your first 100-mile attempt on Antelope Island. After that DNF, what did you change? Because things got real here as you're going now for Wasatch. What did you change about your training to get yourself ready to try to achieve a different outcome on your second attempt?
Yeah, and I, obviously I'm gonna make a plug for you guys, but I would highly encourage people to go back and listen to that episode. I'm very honest and vulnerable through that. It was really hard. I still sometimes have a hard time listening to it. It was cool. I mean, trust me, it was great to listen to, but it was hard because mentally I fell apart. And Nate was there. Nate can attest to it. I wasn't right that day. I've said this a couple of times. I wanted to be right. I just wasn't. And as hard as I tried mentally, I couldn't get into the game on Antelope. And I know what that looks like or how that's supposed to feel, and it just didn't happen on Antelope. So the big thing for me was, truth be told, was being ready mentally. That was key for my success at Wasatch. And I took a lot of precautions or a lot of steps to get there. One is I hired a coach, which was very important to me. I know I said a coach wasn't for me the last time, so I'm eating my words, but it also was one of the greatest things I've probably ever done. And I obviously hired Melody to be my coach, which big shout out to her. She did a fantastic job helping me get there. So it was really good to hire someone that knows what it takes to get an athlete across the finish line. So that helped out a lot. I talked a little bit about how my family played a big impact with me on Antelope, and I made sure that everything was in a good place. And my wife was so great. She's just like, hey, just go. We're good. Do you. Have fun for 36 hours. We'll see at the finish line. And that went a long way for me. So, the mental aspect was really important in just making sure that I was prepared for what was coming my way. The other thing I'll share about that was, and I truly feel like this was a divine inspiration or divinely sent my way, was David Goggins has this video out there, and it's the 1 second decision. And that alone totally changed the game for me when I was out there. Anytime I started to struggle or I was kind of getting sad about something, his 1 second decision is you stop and you say, like, this is how it is. Like, you own it, you face it, and you get after it. And that was really important to me. I also had some stuff that I told myself, like, when I start to feel sad or feeling like I'm defeated, I'm going to think about the things that make me really happy. And that was my daughters, my wife, again, my religion, Jesus Christ, that kind of stuff. And it really went a long way for me staying in the game mentally. But, the physical stuff, my training, that totally took a whole different shape. Again, much, praise goes to Melody for this. But for antelope, it's like 7,000 feet total. And anyone that knows Wasatch, it's like 23,000 feet of vert. So you're in a totally different game. The route at times is super technical. So I had to change up the whole game. The biggest thing that I would say was getting my biggest weakness. I knew would be heat. I would struggle when it got hot, and so I was in the sauna. I was doing runs in the middle of the day, just trying to like seriously kill myself off, for lack of a better term, when it comes to getting that heat exposure and heat training. So that was really important. I spent a lot of time, obviously, both of you did a lot of training runs with me. We'd go up Bear Canyon, which is the start of the race, a lot of trainings up and down hills. I went on, me and Nate did another portion of Wasatch from Big Mountain to Lambs Canyon. It was just trying to get a lot of getting used to the trail, getting used to how technical things are, because, as I mentioned before, I'm a road runner at heart. Like, that's who I am. And I tripped a lot. Like, when I paced you remember, like, I tripped a ton, and I twisted both of my knees multiple times, and I was like, man, if this is how Wasatch is going to be, I'm going to get destroyed early. Like, I truly was thinking that when I'm out there pacing you, Jacob. I was like, this is not going to end well. Like, there's no way this goes good if this is how, within 26 miles, I paced you for 26 miles. I was like, if this is how 26 miles goes, I'm in trouble. Like, it's not going to end well. But it was good to just keep doing it. And that's that would be the recommendation I make to anybody is, if you struggle, like, that's okay. Like, get back up and go. Like, keep trying, keep pushing yourself, because your body will adapt. You will grow. Those muscles will develop, and you're going to become a better runner. And again, a lot of it has to be, you have to start believing that you're going to get there, because, after Antelope, I doubted myself majorly, and I had great friends. I had great family members that told me, you got this, you're going to do it. But that doubt was there for a long time. And I really started believing when all three of us did the Skyline 55K. But yeah, so, for me, I had to really learn to believe in myself. And that was the hardest part. Like, I remember multiple times going out for like 10-mile runs, 15-mile runs. And I was like, I can do this, but I don't know if I can go further than that. And like, especially if it's hot, if it's this, it's that, right? But what really changed my mind and made me believe that I had this, and it was beautiful because both of you were there for it, was the Skyline 55K. That changed the whole game for me. When I did that, and I felt like I kept it at, the pace, the Wasatch 100 pace that I was shooting for, and getting to the end of that, my confidence, I mean, you both saw me, it was like a rocket. It shot off at that moment. I was like, Wasatch is going to be good.
Yeah, I could see that at the end of the race. You were just like, when you saw me hit the wall with that heat, and you just kind of got a burst of energy, you were like, okay, this is it. This is my heat training paying dividends.
And I was impressed with, because I remember that Skyline 55K. I kind of went out hot out of the gate, as our listeners have. You can go back and listen to my recap of the race, but. And I faded there at the end, but I remember you came in not too long after me, and you were just in such good spirits. You looked strong, and like you looked like you were ready to keep going, and that was like, oh man, he's ready then, because I was zonked after that 55K, but you were ready to keep going, and yeah, I could definitely see like you're ready. If you can do a 55K with 7,000 feet of vert and still feel ready to keep running after that, I think that's the goal as you prepare for 100, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, Ryan, let's get to the day before the race.
Okay.
Right, how are you feeling now that it's here? You've put in all this training, you hired a coach, you changed a lot of aspects of how you run over the past few months, all for this one race. How are you feeling in that day before the race?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly felt really good. I was at peace with like everything. Not to make a big push for melatonin, but I'm telling you, like, me and melatonin became best friends because I didn't sleep good for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before Antelope, and I was like, you know what, sleep is important for me, like, to just keep me mentally grounded. And so I was taking melatonin just to get a good night's rest. And I'm telling you, like, I felt so good, like, the day before, even the night of the race. Like, when I went to bed that night and the race was next morning, I think I got like 7-8 hours of sleep. I think I mentioned that to you and Melody, but I felt good. But, getting up, knowing that the race was the next day, I just stayed really, I kept my body just really in a good place. Went and picked up my race bib, dropped off my drop bags. And I remember being there at the race start, and it hit. I was like, man, this is happening. And like when I grabbed that race bib, I put an Instagram post out there about it, but I was like, it just got real. Like, this is happening. And like, I saw Yoga Mike there. I saw a few other people that I know. And I was just like, dude, like this is going down. I saw John Grobens, who's I think the race director, and Claude Grant, who's also, like big into he's like a program director as well for the Wasatch 100. So it just was really cool to see all these people that I've seen in videos, and I've seen like, that they're ultra runners. And I was like, man, like this is the bigs. Like this isn't like, not trying to talk down Antelope or Buffalo, but like this is the real deal. Like this is the big leagues. Like you're in for the real kick here. And so I was like, man, like okay, like let's get it. But I have to say, like when preparation, I mean, we know the tagline or whatever, but like when preparation meets opportunity, that's when success can happen. And like I felt ready. Like I was ready to go after it. I didn't know what else to do. Like I was getting really agitated. You guys saw me when I was going out and just doing like little runs the week before. I was just like, "Oh, I gotta go. Like I'm feeling ready." So felt good the night before, the day before, the night before. I was ready. I was excited to go to sleep that night. I slept really well, and it was game on. Come that morning.
Take us through the beginning part of the race. How did that go?
Yeah. So. Man, like when people joke about it being a conga line at the start of the race, like that's an understatement, man. Like all the way up Bear Canyon, you are just like, that's the slowest I've ever done bear. And I'll be honest, for me, being that I'm not an elite, like perfect. It was exactly, and I would tell anybody, get in the middle to the end if you're just wanting to finish Wasatch and you're not looking to like, do some fast time. Just get in the middle there and settle in and let everyone just pull you up, because you just didn't go fast. Like there was no part of that you don't. And that's like, in my opinion, that's the worst part of the whole race. Like the elevation at times can get up, and I'm not exaggerating, or the incline is like 60% at parts, like especially that last like third mile. Like it's awful. And so
yeah, and for our listeners out there who aren't familiar with the race, so Wasatch basically starts off with like, what is that, like a 4,500 foot climb
over like 3 miles. Yeah, just straight up the mountain basically. So yeah, so you just got a conga line going up the mountain. Yeah, and it was really good. I mean, right when you start the race, the first 3 miles is kind of flat, and it's just, you're kind of warming up. And you're kind of in a big conga line. People are kind of running here or there. People are really excited. I didn't talk at all because I was like, this isn't my time to talk. I don't want to like get excited. Like part of me had like the David Goggins mentality. I'm like, these people are all excited, and I'm like, man, like I'm going to war here. Like this is Ryan's time. Like, and as I mentioned, you guys heard me, like this is my race. Like, and that was my mentality inside. Like I'm not taking away from it what anyone else did, but like this was my race internally. So like I was like, I was taking no prisoners. Let me put it that way. Like I wanted to finish this, whatever the cost may be. And you guys heard me say that enough times out there. And so I was just like, hey, you guys can talk to me, but I'm probably going to kind of keep to myself. I said a few things to people, but I really kept to myself. And, until I kind of met up with, a fellow friend on the race, Michael Whitesides. He was kind of behind me going up the trail, and then we met up about mile 7, 8, and we ran together for a few miles. And it was really cool to chat with him a little bit. And, he's like, we're doing it, man. This is it. And so it was fun. It was fun to get, that first, it's an unofficial water station where, I think they call it the Grobens water station, which it's the guy who started the race. He does it like mile 10 or 11 up Farmington Canyon, and, you fill up your water. And so it was fun to get to that point. I'm like, man, I'm 10 miles in. Let's go. Let's just go. And it was smooth sailing to that point. Body felt amazing. The day was still really cool at that point. So I was having a great time.
So at what point did you meet up with Nate for the first time?
So that's a great question. So after the Grobens water station, the next aid station official, if you will, is Bountiful B. And I got to Bountiful B feeling really good. Met one of my professors there, Matt Mortensen, he was one of my professors at Weber State University. He was so kind. He gave me a big hug. Was like, Ryan, I love you. Go get it. He took care of me. I took off, made it to Sessions lift off, which is 4 miles after that at mile 20, and then it was. I'm gonna be honest, like that part's a little bit treacherous. Like from Sessions lift off, it's like mile 20-ish to Big Mountain, which is where Nate was at mile 32. So it's 12 miles. The sun's out. It's hot, and if you go back and you look at the DNFs, like that's where the majority of people DNF is along that section. It gets warm, it's hot, and it is the hottest part of the day. And I'm grateful for my training because I was reeling one person in after another. Like it was just me passing person after person after person, and it was just I knew it was going to be hot. I was ready for it, and I had brought tons of water with me. I had my 2 liter in my vest. I had both of my bottles in the front, and then I actually brought a handheld as well. So tons of water. I had my reflector, my the right gear on, my hoodie that reflected the sun away. So I rocked it, made it to Nate. I remember Nate being like, dude, you're looking great. And I'm like, man, I'm feeling great. And it was awesome to catch up with him there at mile 32 at Big Mountain.
What were you thinking, Nate, first time laying eyes on Ryan?
So Ryan talked about how, the first time he really felt like he believed he could do it was at Skyline. I still wasn't there yet. Like I was trying to be as positive with Ryan as I could, but I hadn't done the training. I didn't know how he felt. And I was kind of like, well, there's a fair chance that he's going to DNF, get partway through, and it's just going to, he's going to hit a wall. And so I was really interested to see how he was going to be doing at that point, because I knew that first half of that race was going to be really tough, right? Getting up there, the mental game of being there and knowing that you still have more than half the race left and sitting there in the heat. And when I saw Ryan come in, I mean, he was 100%. I mean, he was happy, he was smiling, he was excited, he had energy. You could see some of those runners coming in there, and they were already dragging. I was like, everything must have come together just right because Ryan's looking awesome.
I like the honesty too, Nate. I think everybody on anyone's first 100 that they're definitely, doubt. I mean, just any 100 anybody ever does. Like there's a significant possibility that a DNF is going to happen. So Nate, did you start pacing him through this next section then?
Yeah, so I started at Big Mountain and then went through to Lambs. So that's like 15 and a half miles or something. And that was like, I felt like even though it wasn't the biggest climb of the race, I still felt like it was a pretty challenging part because the heat was there. Like we were exposed almost the entire time. And we start out that leg, going uphill, and then even the downhill, it was challenging. It was technical. We couldn't really just kind of coast. And it was warm, and we came into Lambs, and I've got video of this, but Ryan was still just as happy and cheerful. So I'm like, things are going about as good as they could be going at this point in the race.
Yeah. How was that section for you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, Nate hit it right on the head. It's there's parts of that where it's really technical. Like you've got like these ball bearing rocks that are just awful coming down Big Mountain as you're going down to Alexander Watershed. Like it's just awful. And you're just like, man, this isn't fun. Like when we trained on it, me and Nate trained on it a few times, or I did, and then I trained with Ken. I slipped on those rocks. Like I landed on my behind a few times, and I was like, man, this is gonna be tough doing this in real life, or in the race. And so,
in
real
life.
Yeah, in real life, right? Like, yeah, but it was really cool because I just felt like me and him were just it felt really good. Like he said, like it was a positive experience. Me and him were having a good conversations. We were laughing, like we're just having a good time. And we kind of came up on this girl. Her name was Chris, and I think Nate remembers her. And I think she latched on to us because we were just so positive, and like we're laughing, we're having a good time. And I'm just like, dude, you're welcome to hang with us. Like, do what you need to, but we're gonna push through this. And I failed to mention this earlier, but one of my goals or the keys to success I felt like was being very positive on this race. I let negativity rule me on Antelope, and I swore I wouldn't let this happen. And I got to be careful, but I ran into a guy, and there's something I could say that would give away who he is very easily. So I'm going to be very careful about what I say here. But he just was bashing the race. I told Nate all about this guy while we were running, and he's like, this race is, bleepity bleep. He's just like, the trail is awful. You can't run. And he's just like super negative. And I was just like, I literally looked at him. I was like, okay. And I just took off past him. I was like, I don't want this negativity in me right now. Like, he can be negative. He's going to struggle through this race. Like, I'm being positive. I want to have good times, good memories. I'm soaking this all in. And I'm not playing this game. Like, I'm not going to have people like tell me negative things. And you guys probably remember, and I said it to all of you, but I was like, I want you guys to be positive when I get to aid stations. I might look like crap. I might be crap when I'm running or at parts of this race, but like, I want you guys to think positive about me and like pick me up, because any negative is just going to pull us down. So, and I really appreciate that from you, Ken, and from you two and Ken. Like, you guys really did that, and that meant a lot to me.
Well, and that was, I knew that that's what you wanted me to do. And like I had to fight the urge, right? Because it is kind of, sometimes it is fun to just kind of get a little bit negative and bash this person or that person, or, swear at the rock that's in front of you, or make a joke about whatever it might be. But I really tried to do that too, because I'm like, Ryan needs the positivity, and I could tell it was working for you too, because you were being super positive. And it made a big difference, because that wasn't our approach on Antelope. We were talking about every negative thing that popped into our head, and it didn't help us. So.
Like, as you say, like the whole positivity thing, like I can relate to that dude who was swearing at the trail and bashing the race, because I have been that guy, on hundreds, and I did end up finishing. I can specifically remember Ute 100. I got so angry at the race director for the course that he put together, so it can be it can be so easy to fall into the negativity. You're right, and if you fall into it and can't get out of it, it will definitely lead you down a dark road. But
yeah,
that's awesome that you're able to maintain that positivity. So now you're coming in, you're to basically the halfway point, mile 47.5. So nightfall is starting to come on, correct?
Yep.
And you pick up a new pacer, your buddy Ken. So take us through what you're thinking now, as you've now been out for a full 16-ish hours, something around that. And you're coming up on the halfway point in time, the halfway point in miles, and now it's getting dark.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, and before we get there, I do got to throw a shout out. I did have the greatest crew, and major props to Claire, Owen, Nora, Simon, and Charlie. They prepared this amazing food for me there, and it was like the best chicken noodle soup and best bread ever. This was all Nate's family. And I'm telling you, like, I ate that and I just felt like $1,000,000. I was like, yeah, boy, like, let's go. Like, it's game time. Let's go up Lambs Canyon and have fun. So I picked up Ken, who was my next pacer, and me and Ken we just had a good time. There's a lot of fun memories from me and him going together. I worked with Ken for a very short period of time, but we became friends very quickly. And we slowly went after it at night. That's probably the best way to go to say what we did, mostly because we had people that would pass us, and they were running full on like downhill anytime that there was any sort of downhill up there. And then with us just power hiking, we would pass every one of them gradually. And I remember just telling them, like, hey, let's stay consistent. We don't need to run in the dark. I don't want a twisted ankle. And I don't really want to get hurt or have you get hurt. So let's just stay consistent, because a lot of that 22 miles from Lambs to Brighton is really uphill. Like, most of it is uphill. You've got some flat sections, and we would run those. Like, we would, more or less try to run them, but it was mostly a lot of that uphill. But it was beautiful areas up there, near Dog Lake and Desolation and Scotts Pass, all that. It was beautiful, like, from the dark. But I do have to share, like, this was some wild stuff, because, and I think I've hinted to a couple of you about this, but I've never hallucinated like this in my whole life up there. And I started seeing some pretty wild stuff. And it was like, I know people talk about it, but like me and Nate, when we did Antelope, I saw something and I believed it, but it was like constant for me, like to the point that I started like jumping out of the trail and Ken's like, what's the matter? And I'm like, I just saw a wolf. Like a wolf came at me. And he's like, there's no wolf, man. Like, shut up. Let's go. And I'm like, okay. And then like I saw like these two, like looked like one of my daughters. It looked like these two girls playing off in this field. And it freaked me out. And I looked over with my headlamp and they disappeared. And like, that's just the beginning of what I saw. And I'm like, holy cow. So it was kind of crazy, like the hallucinations and the stuff that I saw, which is really weird because I wasn't really tired. I didn't feel, I'm sure I was tired, but I didn't feel it. It wasn't like I wanted to lay down and fall asleep or whatever, and during that time period was, where my hips started to hurt. That was the first thing that started to give out on me, was about mile, I think it was like 63, 64. And when we got into the Scotts Pass aid station, I remember sitting down in the aid station, and that was probably one of the few times I really got kind of low and I was struggling. And I give a lot of credit to my support group and the people that I have close to me in my life. I opened up my cell phone and kind of read some of the text messages that I'd received and was in that group chain, and man, it was special. Like those people that spent some time to send me a kind message and inspiration, it picked me up. I started crying. Ken was putting putting his arm around me, giving me a hug. He's like, we got this, man. Let's go. And I was like, you're right. Let's go. Let's get after it. And we picked it up and we got to Brighton. We finished. I was struggling. My hips were hurting really bad. I think I mentioned that to you guys when I finally got into Brighton, that my hips were on fire. But I was like, hey, we got 31 miles to go, and Jacob, you're bringing me home, so let's do it. So it was a fun time at night. Like I really enjoyed that experience. It was fun to be up in that section, and the only thing I regret is I wish I would have saw it during the daylight.
It's got to be gorgeous during the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
That part is you're like on ridge lines on top of these mountains. Like it's got to be awesome. But that's cool. That's awesome that you were able to find some strength from people's kind words and belief in you. I think that's something I've always drawn upon on my few hundreds that I've done, is those, just hearing other people's beliefs and just you just feel so loved that these people would care enough about you to even send you a text during this time.
Yeah.
It's really special. So you came in to Brighton, and like you said, you're about 50K from the finish at this point, basically mile 70. It's like about 5:30 a.m., was it, Nate? Somewhere around there?
Yeah, I think that's about right. It might have been, yeah, because we were thinking it was going to be 4:30. It ended up being closer to 5:30 because we didn't factor in as much on the aid stations. But yeah, sounds right.
Yeah, this is where I hadn't seen you at all up into the race until this point. So I'm not gonna lie, I didn't say anything at the time, really, to anyone. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, oh man, we got 12 hours to do a 50K. Like that sounds great, but I knew that the last 30 miles things really slow down, and you just never know what kind of walls you're gonna hit. In my head, I'm thinking, okay, like, get him refueled up here, but then we got to hit this section hard. I was almost saying like, we got to bank some time, was what I was thinking. But anyways, what was going through your head, Ryan, as you got kind of your last big aid station there at Brighton? It's now, the sun's about to come up, you're about to embark on this big climb, and then this technical trail that leads back down to the finish.
Yeah, I mean, again, I know I'm giving a lot of props to people here, but major props to Nate again. He had this lavish breakfast for me there, and it was like bacon and eggs and pancakes. I was like, dude, I can't even eat all this, and there was oatmeal, and anyways, it was special. Like, again, he did a great job as the crew chief and really took care of me. But at this point in the race, I totally still had the mentality that I was finishing, right? Like, I was like, we're good. Like, there's nothing, like, and I, again, back to that thought of like, I don't want any negativity. And this is where me and you kind of, like, I kind of clashed with you. I didn't probably speak how I really felt. And I know you were like, dude, just say how you feel. We'll get to that point in a second. But I was like, this is done, man. It's a done deal. Like, yeah, I'm hurting, but like, I'm going to finish it. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. And so I learned my lesson about how tough going out of Brighton is. And that is not a fun section. Like, I would recommend anybody who decides to do Wasatch, like, go climb up to Catherine's Pass. Like, you have to do that. Don't skip it in your training, because I didn't know what I was in for, and I learned the hard way, and that's where we lost time majorly. And Jacob, you were there, you experienced it with me, but getting up to the top of that and then coming down, and it's so technical coming back down. It's so many little rocks, and you're just kicking stuff, and you're like, holy cow, like, this is just eating me alive. And I remember thinking, like, coming out of that, like, so I felt really good when we were Brighton, but going up to the top, and you're like super positive, and you're just like talking to me about everything under the sun, and I'm just like, dude, I'm just chopping away at the ground, like, with my poles, and trying to come down Catherine's Pass to Aunt Knowles, and I'm just like, dude, I just want to go, like, let's get this, like, anytime I can try to open up, and at this point, luckily, my hips started to feel good, but my feet were now starting to kick in with how painful they were. And it makes sense. If you take a mallet to a piece of meat for 70, 80, 90 miles, like, it's going to be pretty bruised. And my feet, I'm still, what are we now, 10, 11 days past?
Over a week, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still paying for it with my feet. Like, they're way better, but, like, I still am. So yeah, we got to Aunt Knowles, me and you, and I was feeling good. Like, I felt like we were in a pretty good place, but now as I kind of think back, I could see some of the hesitation. You were starting to get a little worried, like, hey, I don't know about this. And so anyways, I guess I'll flip it back on you. Like, I want to know your thoughts at this point when we got to Aunt Knowles, that first aid station.
That was after the climb.
Uh-huh.
Then we climbed, and we had a little descent,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know if you remember me saying this, but I think at this point, I knew that you had the mindset, like, to get there. In my head, I'm calculating, okay, like, it was like 20-minute miles, and we should be good, right? Well, we had just done, like, it was like 30 to 35-minute miles going through that section.
Yeah.
And so, like, I started to feel some stress for you at that aid station. I think you remember this. Remember, I told you, I was like, hey, like, basically, like, we gotta hit this next, because at this point you had about a marathon left.
Yep.
That was about a 5-mile section, and I was like, all right, we gotta hit this next half marathon hard. Do you remember me telling you that?
I do remember that.
Yeah, and I was like, we have to bank some time. We got to hit this hard, so that way you can just cruise and you won't have the stress on the last half. Like, I was just like, you're in a half marathon race right now. We gotta find a way to get sub 20 here through this section. So, like, my mind was just thinking, okay, like, I just gotta find a way to get him to I just gotta ride him. I have to push him. And I wanted so badly, Ryan, to just set the pace for you, but every time I suggested that, you were like, no. I think you said it would just tick me off trying to keep up with you or something like that. And so you're like, I got this, but and you did. I remember we left Aunt Knowles, and we had a climb coming out of there again, but then we started to get on a little more like rolling trails and not as steep. And you did start to focus in for a good few miles there, that I remember you did cook like some 16, 17-ish minute miles. And that's when I started to really believe that. I'm like, okay, if Ryan can just keep this up for another, 5 to 8 miles, I think we'll be good. But that nice trail quickly started to end and become really technical again. So yeah, take it away from there. What were you thinking? Because you got in the zone at that one point, and I was like, oh, he's got it.
Yeah, and you're right. We were hitting it, and I was feeling really good. I was like, oh yeah, this is in the bag. And again, I still felt really good. Like, I was like, we're good. Even when you told me, like, dude, we got 26 miles, like, we got a marathon, like, I need you to dial it in. I was still like, I kept looking at like my phone because my watch had died, and I was looking at my phone, and I was like, and I was kind of doing the math. I mean, as much as I can do a math after, running 70 something miles, 74 miles, whatever. I was like, dude, we're golden, man. Like, all I got to do is average like 20-minute miles. We're golden. Like, you're worrying about this way more than I am. I'm like, in the bag. And so I dialed in, like you said, like we hit a few good miles there, and then the trail just kind of got really rough again. And again, most runners, if they've experienced this, but you know, trail runners or ultra runners, like even just these little hills started to add up quickly. And then then you hit like mile 80, and then it's almost like downhill consistently from there. And it was like, and there was like rocks everywhere. I remember that. Like
Yeah.
I'm starting to like,
Loose rock, loose rock.
yeah, just loose rock. And I think that's when it hit, man. I was like, I think we're in a bad place. And I remember you told me, you're like, I'm gonna let you say it. You got to tell this portion. Like you have to tell me what you said to me, because like this part's special.
Now, I was saying a lot of things. I was saying a lot of things. Are you talking about as we're headed down the loose rock, and was did you start to express some doubt to me at this point?
So what happened was is I was like, right, like any of the uphill, I was just chopping with my poles. And like I remember I felt like I was working so hard, and I felt like I was in a dream state. And I was glad my watch was off, because I'm like, I guarantee my heart rate's like 180 right now. And I was like, I don't feel good. I'm starting to get like really hot because we were just crushing it. And you were riding me, like you were on me. You're like, dude, you got to pick this up, man. And like my frustration level was just climbing with you. Like I was like, dude, you need to shut up. Like I was like, we got this. Stop worrying about it. Like we're getting there. And you're like, Ryan, I don't know what you got to do, but you got to like figure this out, because dude, you're not going to make it. And I remember like, it was like starting to sow this like this negativity, and I know that wasn't your intention. Like I really know that, like that was not what you were going for. But you're like, dude, you gotta figure this out. Like you gotta dig deep and make it happen. And then right about that time was when Nate called. And Nate, I'd love for you to tell your portion. Then I guess, and I guess I was getting ahead of myself with what you said, Jacob. So I'll jump to that. I'll tell what really impacted me. But I'd love for you to tell the part where you called Jacob and then we talked on the phone. Like that meant a lot.
I was kind of watching you guys all day because I finished my thing. I went and brought you breakfast. I saw where we were at. We were still tracking with some buffer to the cutoff time, so we were feeling good. And but then I sort of key in on each of on the website where it tracked your location, and just see where you were checking in and checking out of the aid stations. And it was looking good for a couple, but then I noticed that like you were starting to fall behind, and I had this spreadsheet where I was taking and updating like all the future aid stations to try and like forecast when you were going to be getting there, because I just wanted to make sure I was paying attention, so that it's the analytical side of me kicking in again, where I wanted to make sure that A, I was in the right place at the right time, but then B, I wanted to make sure you were still tracking to the right, to the final cutoff. And it started getting to the point where it was showing your finish time after 5 o'clock, right? So I was taking your pace, and I was saying like there were a couple where between aid stations, when you factor in the time you waited at the aid station, it was like above 20-minute miles. And I'm like, okay, let's plug in 20-minute miles and assume he can go back and stick to that pace for the rest of it. And you still weren't making it. And I'm like, okay, we're in trouble. So I start texting Jacob. I'm like, hey, you need to tell Ryan something. I didn't know what he was telling you, but I'm like, you need to say something, because this isn't going to work. And then I kind of said, hey, give me a call. I want to get him on the phone. And you must not have got it. But then I just started calling you. I'm like, put me on speakerphone. And so that's when I told Ryan, I said, like, hey, Ryan, we had this whole thing. I know Ryan's obsessed with David Goggins, and I'm not the same way. But the week before the race, I would just, because kind of a fun thing to spread some positivity, I decided I'd send Ryan a quote every day from David Goggins. And one of the quotes was David Goggins saying, sometimes I have to go to my dark place, and sometimes I just have to go dark. And he said that, and I said, okay, this is what Ryan needs right now. And so I just told him, I said, hey, Ryan, it's time to go dark. You need to find something, whatever it is inside you, you need to find it right now, because it's go time or you're not going to make it. And in my mind, I was thinking, he needs to do several miles at 15-minute mile pace, and then he needs to settle into a 20 if he's going to make it. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking he's not going to make it, because like this is, every time we talked about the plan, he kind of said, okay, I'm going to be walking it in for the last several miles. And I thought if he does that, he's in trouble. So anyway, I was like, I got to do something that's going to kick him in the butt. In the back of my mind, I was kind of worried. I'm like, well, I hope it doesn't like push him too much and he gets burned out. But I think he needs something. So you were telling him the same thing. I went and gave him the message, and I think maybe the two of us together convinced him that it was time to turn it up a notch.
Yeah. Thanks, Nate. And that was what I remember as well. So thank you for sharing that.
And at that point, when you hung up the phone, Nate also said something, because I had offered you an Excedrin, and because I knew, like, okay, a Tylenol, an Excedrin, I've been there before. I had been right where you were at, Ryan. I was in your spot at Scout. I was behind the cutoffs at Scout, at one point. And so, I knew you had it in you, but I knew you were struggling at that point to somehow pull it out, because obviously this was probably your first time doing it, and so you didn't quite even realize that you had some 15-minute miles in you, at that point. But Nate suggested, hey, hey, Nate just told you, Jacob's gonna give you a couple Excedrin, you're gonna take it, and basically was like, and you're gonna start, Nate was like, you need to start doing 18-minute miles or less. I remember Nate saying that, just basically telling you don't have a choice. You're taking some Excedrin, and you're going to start picking your pace up. Yeah. And so, I would start digging through my bag, and you go ahead, I think, and I'll just catch you like a couple miles down I just a couple minutes down. And so you start going ahead, and I get that Excedrin out, and I'm just taking my sweet time, because you're doing at this point you were doing 23-minute miles on this terrain. And anyways, I ran after you a good ways before I finally caught you, and remember just feeling shocked, and I passed a couple runners just on my own that you had passed on your own. I was like, dang, whatever Nate said is working, because Ryan, you just picked it up to a 16-minute mile in that. And then I caught up, you took a couple Excedrin, and then we started running down the mountain together at that point.
Yeah, I just want to touch on a few other things that you said, Jacob. I mean, Nate, what you said really helped, but Jacob, you said a few other things too that for me really hit deep, because I'm 80 plus miles into a race. I don't really want to be stepping on rocks. I'm afraid I'm going to twist an ankle, twist my knee. I'm really scared, and to do that. And I remember you being and this is the religious part of the podcast, so hopefully I don't offend any of your listeners, but you were like, dude, you got to have faith that you're going to be fine. And I don't know if that's how you said it, but that's how it interpreted in my head. You're like, you got to have faith that you're going to be fine. You got to stop worrying that you're going to twist your knee and your ankle. And then something else you said, and I'm sorry, try to keep my composure here, is you're just like, you said to me, you're like, dude, you've got to finish this. You don't know who this is impacting. There's a lot of people, and I won't say everything you said, because some of it is very sensitive and dear to me, but you're like, you have to finish this. You've got to finish it. There's people that are expecting you to finish this. And between what Nate said to me on the phone and then you saying those two things, I remember when I took off past you, like you said, and when you were digging out the Excedrin, I said a prayer, and I was just like, Heavenly Father, I've given everything I have. I've given you all of this, and I've always given you the glory. I've always been like, I want to do good with this talent you've given me. I need my legs back one more time. Just give me my legs one more time. And if you'll give me my legs, I'll give everything I have. And I'll do my very best to get to that finish line, and I'll give you all I have. And I don't know, I've had some people joke with me and say it was an Excedrin, but I got my legs back. I've never felt, obviously I've never done a 100-miler, but I've never felt my legs come back. And I felt like it was a Saturday morning, and I was just going out for a fun run with the friends. And I was like, yeah, boy, we're back. And you know what happens from there. Take it away, Jacob.
Yeah, it was amazing, man. Because you just started And right before, I remember saying those things to you, because I remember right before I actually said those things to you, it was even after you took off, after Nate's call, you expressed, and that was, I think, your first time really expressing whoa, I might not finish, where I think it started to click into your head, I might not finish. And you even talked about, yeah, you talked about not being able to run downhill with the technical terrain. And you talked about, you were like, well, I'm just gonna, I'll just run the front, even if I finish after the cutoff, I'll still, I can still finish it or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. But I knew at that point, like, no, you have it in you. Like, you're gonna finish before the cutoff. I knew it was in there. But yeah, you just started cooking. And so we're approaching that aid station there as we're coming off the single track trail, and I can see on the map that it turns into a dirt road, which I'm so grateful when I saw that, because I'm like, okay, we're gonna hit some nice smooth terrain. You were doing 16 miles though, 16-minute miles, those last couple miles off that technical single track, and I remember just feeling so proud of you that you were digging, and finding that, and so we made the plan to. At least I thought I made the plan as we came into that aid station, where you were gonna give me your pack, I was gonna refill your waters and your food, and then I was gonna give you your pack back, and you were gonna take off, and then I was gonna take care of myself afterwards, because we just had to get you through. I could catch up. And so we roll in, and what happened at that aid station, Ryan?
It was awesome. Well, I interpreted as, so I didn't hear that he did that. I interpreted as, hey, Ryan, give me your pack. You just keep going. And I was like, Roger that. So I gave you my pack and I ran. And I was like, yeah, boy, like this is road running Ryan right here. Like, I have nothing on my back. I got nothing restricting me. I'm gone. And so I took off down that dirt road. And I'm like, Jacob he better dig deep now, because he's going to have to try to catch back up to me, because I'm gone. And I remember I came to a stream because I was like, I want to cool down because it was getting hot again. So I got my hat and dumped water all over me. And then I just took off again. And I thought it was like a mile or two. I could be wrong, but I remember just going, and then I finally could like hear you kind of like yelling and like huffing and puffing, trying to catch up to me. You're like, dude, what are you doing? And you're like, you were supposed to wait for me. And I'm like, I thought I was just supposed to go. Anyway, so yeah, I remember you catching up to me.
I filled up your stuff, and I start looking around, because I'm just so focused on get Ryan's pack filled up, and get him out. And so after I fill up your pack, I start looking around, and there's no Ryan. I didn't even see you take off. And so I'm looking around, and like I kind of go over to a volunteer, and I'm like, did you see anybody run off into the bushes? Like, is he taking a poo back there in the trees or what? And the volunteer's like, I haven't really seen anybody go off into the bushes. And I'm like, huh. And so I kind of wander around a little bit again, and then I go back, and I'm like, has 10, I think you were 108, right? 108 or 109 was your number. I was like, is 108 checked out? Like, and he looks at his thing, and he's like, yeah, he checked out like 5 minutes ago. And I'm like, what? and then I'm like, shoot, and that's when I realized you misinterpreted what I said. And so then I was scrambling to fill my pack up. And yeah, I was running like 8-minute miles down that dirt road trying to catch up to you. And it was a good mile or so, probably about a mile and a half before I did catch up to you. But I remember just seeing you as when I finally got you in my sight, because a part of me still is half worried, like, like, oh, great, like, because I'm like, he's not in the right mental state. He's going to take a wrong turn. Like, I'm like, I'm stressed that I'm not going to find you. And anyways, when I saw you down on the dirt road, and I just see you like just moving your arms, just going, and it was just, it was good to see. And you threw your pack on, and we kept going. But I just thought that was a funny moment. I'm not gonna forget just looking around, wondering where the heck my runner went. went to.
Yeah, I totally misinterpreted you, but that was fun because once I got that pack back, I was like, "We're going, dude. Like, let's go. We're hauling down this road. It's a good like Jeep road. Like, let's go." And we just kept hauling. And like I remember you being like, "Dude, you're killing it. Like, you're hitting 13-minute. I think that's what it was. I could be wrong, but
Yeah, you were doing 13-minute miles.
you're like, dude, you are crushing this. You're like, you're making all your time back and then some." And I was like, we're gonna go until I know I could walk this in if I very much had to. I'm like, we're gonna keep pushing. And again, my legs felt amazing, and I truly feel blessed that that happened. We made it to that last, the second to last aid station. We got in there really quickly. You're like, hey, walk for a second. I think you're in a good place. We filled up our packs, and you're like, we got 2 miles till we pick up Nate and finish this off. And I remember just being like, I felt like that was finally the moment there with mile 90, 10 miles to go. I finally felt like it was secured. Like, I think we secured it. It's in the bag now.
Yeah. I felt the same exact way. When we got to like the aid station at mile 90, 2 miles before we picked up Nate, like you had made up so much time in the last like 5 miles. All 5 miles had been like 16 minutes or under, some with 13-minute miles. And like at that point I knew you had banked enough time just in that small stretch to where you could do, it was like 23-minute miles and you would have finished. And that's when I knew, like, okay, we're set.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
Nate, what were you thinking during this time when you're just kind of like waiting for updates and holding your breath that he's picked the pace up?
Well, what was the aid station right before you guys picked me up?
it was
I don't remember.
Staten.
That's right. So I was watching those couple aid stations after I called you, and I'm like really anxious to see how is he going to be doing. One of those, you averaged like 13-minute miles, and I was just kind of blown away. I'm like, holy crap, something got lit under Ryan, and he's really cooking. And I noticed that in and out, like I saw that one where he ditched you because I'm like, he didn't even stop. Like he did not even stop at that aid station. And so I was like, okay, this guy's going to actually do it. And I started to believe that it was going to happen. And then I was rushing to get there because I'm like, oh, actually, I better hurry because he's going to get to this freaking the wall quasi aid station before I get there. So I hurry and got there, and you guys come cruising in, and I was like, okay, just like Ryan said, he's at that point, I knew that he could almost walk it in and be good.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was in the bag.
It was 2 in the afternoon. The cutoff was at 5 p.m. And so you had 8 miles to go and 3 hours to do it.
Yep.
And that's when we were like, all right, Ryan's got this. And it was all downhill, basically, down and flat. So,
Yep.
yeah. So how was the final 8, Ryan? Because now it's in the bag, right? So it should be easy.
Yeah.
Correct? How was it?
Yeah, it's funny how when you're like, okay, I got this in the bag and whatnot, like your body is just like, I probably should have kept my mindset like still locked in. I was kind of like in the celebration mode. I was like, oh yeah, like this is it, and the three of us are just having a good time. We're chatting. We're like, it's cheerful. Nate's taking like 1,000 pictures of us and videos, and I'm like, doing good. I'm looking over Jacob. I can tell he's a little bit beat up. He's had his fun. He's like, you've killed me off a couple of times with these sprints of yours. So I'm like, and I know how I feel. My legs are done. They're shot. It's like, I'm going to give whatever I have to just to get across the finish line, before the 36-hour cutoff. But it was really special to have both of you there. It would have only been sweeter to have Ken there as well, because the three of you really helped get me there, across that finish line and finish, do the whole race. But it was fun for the three of us to get there. We got to that next aid station at Decker, which is, 5 miles left. And I remember thinking like, it's in the bag, I just got to go 5 more miles. And that was a long 5 miles just because you're going around Soldier Hollow, or not Soldier Hollow, Deer Creek Reservoir. And it just felt like it went on forever. I remember thinking like, this is just never going to end. And I've ran that. I think I kept telling you guys, I've ran this before multiple times just because of work retreats and stuff. And I remember being like, this is so much longer than I remember it being. And then, to add more salt to the wound, I've joked with you guys about this, but I got stung by a wasp on my leg, like with like 3 or 4 miles to go. And I think Nate thought I was joking, or someone thought I was joking. Maybe it was you, Jacob. One of you told me you thought I was messing. You're like, oh, he was hallucinating that. And I'm like, no. And I still have the bruise from it. Like, it doesn't make any sense that I still have this wasp sting, but it got me good. And I was like, of course, I got like 3 or 4 miles left, and I get stung by a freaking wasp. I'm like, whatever, man. Like, fine. Like, that's good. Like, this wasn't hard enough. Like, okay, let's just add it on. Like, let's pull the duct tape out and let's like tape it on. So, but it was fun to like be there with you guys. Like, we would run anything that was a little bit downhill, or around Deer Creek. That was great. And then we kind of just walked, and we got passed by quite a few people, but I didn't really care. For me, I was just wanting to be there. I was trying to live in the moment. One goal that I had kind of from the get-go, I forgot to mention this, was I decided not to listen to any music throughout the whole race. And outside of a little music that Jacob played for me, like at mile like 74 or something, I didn't listen to any music the whole time. And I want to just soak it in. Wasatch has always been one of my goals. It's been my goal race for a long time. I've loved it. And I didn't want it to be disturbed by having music or, trying to wish it away. I was like, no, I want to soak in every moment and enjoy this race. And so it was fun to go the whole race, not really listening to any music whatsoever outside of, the one song you played for me there. And, it was just, it was fun. It was fun to get, a mile left. I remember Nate kept sending updates to everybody, like, Ryan's 2 miles out, mile out, a half mile out. And like I remember my phone was just blowing up, and it was like really cool to see the love, the appreciation. And then, I remember just saying to you guys, like, let's get this crap done. I didn't use the word crap, but I said something else, and there's a recording of that out there. So I remember being like, let's just go. And you could see the finish line, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful to cross that finish line. Like, it was like, after everything that we went through and all the ups and downs, and Jacob, you put it perfectly when we were out there. You're like, man, an ultra is like a lifetime in 36 hours. And it was so freaking true. Like, all the ups and downs, the great times, the sad times, the hard times, the cold times, the hot times, like, it all was. And when I crossed that finish line, I was like, I did it. I can't believe I did it. Like, I mean, I could believe it, but it was amazing. And it was a great experience. And it was fun to see my family there, see my parents, see my wife, my daughters. It was great to see you guys, Melody, Jacob, obviously you guys were there. Ken was there. Just so many great people. And it was like, I mean, obviously I would love the whole world to be there, but the people that mattered the most at that point were there. And that meant a lot to me to have you guys there and to celebrate with me. That meant so much to me. And it was a special moment to cross that. And yeah, it was special.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was so cool to see you finish that off. And I don't know, Nate, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the finish line, but like, as we rounded the corner there and at the finish, and I could see your mom there holding a poster for you, and she looks so proud of her son Ryan completing this race, and just seeing all the support, and seeing Nate's family and just everybody there, your family gathered around. It was cool, and I just felt honored to be a part of it. I remember because you finished with about 30 to 40 minutes to spare. And I remember just with the people that were around us as we were on that kind of last stretch through that just dirt road, just this long winding dirt road. I remember it felt, to me, and I think I said this to you, both of you guys, like it almost felt like sacred ground, because these were the scrappers. These were the people who at one point in their race, it was in doubt, that had to overcome the dark place, had to overcome the pain and be able to find something deeper to get that finish. So it was cool to see you and everyone else just around you, kind of just doing that final home stretch and bringing it home into the finish.
Nate, what did you think? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
So it was funny because I was talking to my wife Claire the night before. We were at the first aid station, and she was talking to one of her friends, and she was like, I can't help it. I keep crying when I see these guys coming into the aid station. I'm getting emotional. And I'm like, it is emotional seeing somebody struggling and continuing to go and doing something really hard. And so my daughter was like, "Do you think Ryan's going to be crying when he comes into the finish?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know. I bet he'll be feeling a lot of things." But when I was coming in, that's what I kind of told her. But when I came in with you, I did get a little emotional because, like, for me, one of the things that's cool about running is it just amplifies everything, right? So it amplifies your pain, but it also amplifies the feeling of relief when you're finished. And I feel like in some ways, like, it amplifies the feelings that you feel for other people. And so when I came in and saw Ryan's mom there running it through the finish with him, it just to me amplified the how special it was, like the way that, you know, our loved ones care about us, and Ryan's loved ones care about him, and you could see his mom there, you could see his family there, and I think it just amplifies their feelings of love for him too, because they're like, he's doing something really hard, they're worried about him, and then to see him coming through and making it was just really special. And I ran up through the finish line and looked at my daughter, and she must have caught me tearing up a little bit because she was crying. And I'm like, it's a really cool thing, and I think it's inspirational for people who watch it, because my wife came home and she said, "I want to do that someday," and she signed up to work with Melody as well. And I'm like, "Good for you. That's awesome," because it is inspiring to see someone work really hard and accomplish something that they didn't know that they could do.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nate.
I don't know if you realize this, but that whole last mile, Ryan, I was holding back the tears as we were coming through. It just felt that the emotion is just there. I love how, Nate, I love how you say that running just amplifies everything's, and it amplifies your feelings when you do something like that with someone else or see them go through that, and you're there through multiple steps of it. It just, you realize, how much you love that person, and just want to see them succeed. So it was just so cool, Ryan, to see you succeed and get that monkey off the back, because I know you really took that DNF hard, and here you go out and you sign up for a harder race with triple the elevation, quadruple the elevation, whatever it is, and you knock it out of the park, in my opinion, man. So
Thank you.
it was so cool to see that. So looking back at the whole training process, the race, whatever it may be, Ryan, what are we got to wrap this up. Sad to say, it feels like we could talk another hour or two on this.
Yeah.
What are your main takeaways from your 100-mile experience?
Yeah, man, you guys are getting me to tear up. So just hearing you guys talk about this again. I'm not gonna lie, when I crossed the finish line, crying was the last thing I wanted to do.
Yeah, your emotions are so shot by that point. I get you.
Yeah, I cried a lot leading up to. You guys heard me cry probably a few times, but I was hurting, and that was the last thing I wanted to do, was cry. I just wanted to celebrate with my loved ones, and I wanted them to be happy, and I wanted them to know I was safe. That was important to me. So that it was done, that it had been completed. But man, that's such a great question. What I would recommend if I was new, like I was, and still am. I'm still learning the ropes of ultra running and trail running and all that. One is, don't be afraid to ask others for help. I was lucky to be surrounded by so many wonderful people who gave me some great advice, namely obviously you and Jacob and Melody as friend and a coach, Nate being someone who was there with me through, Antelope, and he saw me in my worst dark places. But then, surrounding myself with a great crew and great pacers. Ken has done pacing multiple times, and he knew exactly how to get me through the night and keep me happy and joking and full of laughter. I know I haven't spent a lot of time talking about Ken here, but he should not be any undervalued, like with what he did. His value is the same as both of you. And for that, I'm so grateful for him. But asking questions. I asked lots of questions. How should I handle Wasatch? And, whether it was, I don't want to name all the people. There's so many of them out there. But I talked to so many past participants of Wasatch 100. And I was like, what would you recommend I do? And I know they're all like heat, and I'm like, okay, outside of heat, like I understand heat's gonna be my biggest challenge. Like what else? And people were like, get your legs strong, do leg workouts, do this, do that, whatever. And so getting that advice was really important. And don't be afraid to ask those who've gone before you for advice and let them really balance you. The second thing I would say is have a good crew and pacers. Like you guys meant a lot to me out there. And I mean that. Like I'm going to say that. And I know this podcast is probably a lot different than maybe any of your others that you've ever done. And because it feels different in my opinion. But like this, you guys were special to me out there. And like when you do hard things together, you build a relationship and you forge something that's just so strong. And I built that with Nate multiple times after all the races we've done. But, you know, I went through moments that I wanted to beat the crap out of Jacob. And I went through moments where I loved him. Like I really did. I was like, if he tells me one more time, I've got to pick it up. I'm going to punch him. I'm like, I'm so sick of hearing this crap from him. Like I'm dead serious. I was like, if he tells me one more time, he doesn't even know. Like I'm already there. I already know I'm going to finish it. And then, when Nate called and dropped the hammer and was like, dude, you got to find that dark place. Like that's when it really hit. But it was like, it was through those hard times and just like pushing through. And a lot of my thoughts kept going back to Jacob, you at Scout, and remembering what you went through. And I was like, I can do what Jacob did. I know where form do I think I'm a better runner than you. I know I'm probably way less, but I was like, but I got to follow his trend, because even when he was in his dark place, he pushed through and he didn't stop. And even when I remember you saying, I don't know if I want it bad enough. I remember you saying that at mile 60 on yours. And I remember you still got up and went. And I was like, if he doesn't even know if he wants it that bad, but he gets up and goes, then I'm going to freaking do this no matter what happens. And that really, like, seeing that from you was really important. The last thing I'd say, just be humble. Be humble. I love that I hired a coach. I didn't want to do it. I've always thought I was above that. I'm glad I hired a coach. I'm glad I had someone hold me accountable for what I was doing. I'm glad I hired someone that told me what to do, because like climbing mountains, especially on fresh legs, is really easy now. And it was never like that. Nate knows I'm a road runner through and through. And he was worried about me at times, because he's like, dude, you don't do mountains at all. Like you're not good at hills. Like it's okay. You can say it. Like I wasn't good at going up mountains or hills. I'm like, I'm weak. I'm a bigger guy. It just doesn't happen. And now like I went for a little run with one of my friends today, and like he's struggling to go up the mountain. And I'm just like, dude, I'm good. Like do what you need to. Like I'm good. My heart rate kept low and it wasn't even a problem. So, I'm not trying to gloat. I'm just saying like that's what I learned from hiring a coach, and I'm grateful for that experience. So I can keep going. I could tell you so much stuff that I learned. And please reach out to me if you're a first time 100 runner, like, especially if you go for Wasatch, like learn from those who've gone before you. They have so much knowledge to impart, and you'll grow so much.
Yeah, you definitely will. Now, Nate, I think you have a unique perspective on this, is not running 100 miles. Haven't had done that before, but being the crew chief, what were your takeaways as you look back on that weekend and just the whole process of being Ryan's friend and seeing him train through that? What were your takeaways from it all?
I mean, I did have a little bit of an outsider's perspective because I was there with him on Antelope, and I was on a lot of runs with him after. We talked about it a lot. I listened to your first podcast, and I think I kind of get where you were at. And I mean, I told Ryan already on this, and I think this is important. I didn't think he was going to be able to transition to the 100, and the reason for that is because he was such a road runner. He had his morning run that he would do out on the road, and he was so fixated on the number of miles because he loved it that I was like, you're never going to get up on the trails and get enough vert to do Wasatch. But I think the fact that he went to a coach and someone who had done it and knew the ropes and was able to give him a plan that would get him there was, I think, the first step, right? I mean, he made a big shift on that, and you got to give him a lot of credit. Someone who's not used to doing that much vert and then all of a sudden going and shifting the training so much and finding the love for those trails, like he really made that transition, and I wasn't sure he was going to do that. So I think that's the first one. I think the second one we already talked about a little bit is the positivity. And I never really thought about this part because when I'm trying to do something really hard, and I've done marathons and I've done a 50 miler, and and I complained through the whole thing. And I like to listen to music, and that amps me up. But I think the positivity is huge, and so that was a big takeaway for me, that the way that he was able to like focus his mind in on the good stuff that would motivate him. It's so easy to go down those rabbit holes of negativity and complaining and cursing this person or that. But I think like the positivity motivates us better than negativity, and I think that's a big one. And then the last thing is like, at the end of the day, Ryan's the one that did the training. It wasn't easy. And I look at that and I'm like, I want to do Wasatch, but I don't know that I am willing to do that much training. I don't know that I'm willing to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day and do a commute to and from the trails and make that happen. But he did it. So, he gets to enjoy the fact that he was able to do something really hard, but that's because he put the work in. So I think those are my 3 big takeaways.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and that was impressive. Like, Ryan, you don't live right next to the trails, and you got a good 10-15 minute drive to get to Trailhead, and that's just one way, on top of trying to get to work on time and have a family, and everything else. And so, yeah, that I think Nate brings up a good point. Like, you won that race in the training. You did the training, even though it was hard, it was tough. A lot of people, at least out here in Utah, have a trail outside their back door. That's not your circumstance, but you didn't let that stop you from getting in the correct training of getting out and climbing the mountains and getting the vert in. So, anyways, well, we got to wrap this up. I've already kept you guys late enough here, but all I got to say is, I mean, it was such a pleasure to see you out there. And I know, like I said, like, it was kind of cool for me because I felt like you had a very similar experience. I guess I could relate heavily to you, Ryan, when I saw you out there. And it was neat for me to be able to see you in a similar circumstance as myself and know that you could get out and then see you get out of it and hit that gear. And it was such a cool race to be a part of. And Nate, Melody, and I, we couldn't stop talking afterwards about how Nate Allred is the best friends. We could not believe like what Ryan was saying.
I agree.
Thank you.
The spread of food that you had. You spent the whole weekend helping Ryan out, and you got yourself an Airbnb up there near one of the aid stations, and you didn't let a family get in the way of helping Ryan. You brought your whole family to help Ryan, and it was so cool to see you, Nate, helping him out, and to see that friendship between you two out there on the trails and the love that each of you had for one another. I was like, man, this is what life is about, love it, helping each other out with our goals, making sacrifices for one another, because we know that person would probably do the same exact thing for us. And so it was a beautiful thing. 100-mile races are beautiful things to see the runner, but not only the runner, but the people rally around him.
It was fun. I'm just glad he let me join in on the adventure.
Of course. And thanks, Jacob. That's kind of you to say that too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, anyways, we got to wrap it up. Thank you, both of you guys, for joining us here on Trail to 100. And Nate, we're excited to hear about your first 100 whenever that day comes. Ryan, are you going to do another 100, Ryan?
Oh, for sure. No question. I want to sign up for Wasatch again next year. I plan to enter the lottery, and I hope I get drawn again. But, as I've told a lot of people, this is just the beginning. That was so much fun. It was so hard. Wow. And I want this to help define who I am as a human and as a person.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ryan and Nate, for joining us on the pod today.
Hey guys, super exciting news! Pine Tree Running is now Trail to 100 coaching, and Jacob is officially a coach.
That's right. So if you're ready to take the next step in your training and run that race you've always wanted to run, we would be honored to help guide you on your ultra running journey.
At Trail to 100 Coaching, you'll receive a custom running plan with strength training options, constant communication with your coach, and you'll be connected with other runners like you who are also on their Trail to 100.
If you want to learn more, check out our website, trailto100.com. Please feel free to contact us with any questions you have.
If you want to run 100 miles,
Make it happen.